Hey guys, OGalbina here, and today I'm here to tell you why your favorite Smogon Pokemon sucks in Draft League. I know that's a little bit harsh, but I'm going to kind of give my reasonings and explain why I think so, and kind of give you a little bit of insight to what makes these two metagames different in my mind. Now, obviously both Smogon singles and Draft League singles, which is the main metagame that's typically played. There are doubles leagues and different leagues like that, Ubers leagues, S tier leagues, little couple leagues. Like I said, doubles, a bunch of different options, but a good majority of draft leagues are going to be single battles, just like in Smogon OU. But they really do vary if you look at the metas and what's good and what's going to be at the tippy top echelon, things in OU and Smogon, or things in like tier 1 or high point valued mons in draft. And sometimes it varies, and there are Pokemon that are great in both, like Dragapult. Dragapult's great in OU, and it's probably the titan of Draft League. They're both really good in both. Or Urshifu Single Strike, phenomenal in draft, broken in Smogon, but even then, that one's a little bit, it's still a bit of a jump, because I don't think it's necessarily broken in draft. Some people do though, so we won't be talking about that one today. And then you have Pokemon like the one on the screen right here in Reggia Lucky that are very solid in Smogon. OU at times, UU currently definitely has OU viability. Can get many, can do not many, it can do its job very well and sufficiently in Smogon, but in draft, it's pretty god-awful, at least in my mind. Now, those of you who have been around the channel for a while or know me outside of the channel on, Discord, or just in various leagues and stuff like that, know I'm an avid Reggia Lucky hater in draft. I think it's god-awful. I think it's terrible. But even if I, over-exaggerate how bad I think it is, I don't think there's any denying that it's so much better in Smogon than it is in draft. And we're going to be going over 6 Pokemon from each of these categories, whether it be a Pokemon that's really bad in draft but really good in Smogon, or even just a big gap in between them. Like, it's a lot better in draft than it is in Smogon, and vice versa. It's a lot better in Smogon than it is in draft. And we'll be talking about those ones first, kind of why, and it'll kind of be circling back to this main thing that I want to kind of get into before we talk. And before I do that, let me know what you guys think of these kind of videos too. They're a little bit more freeform. I'm kind of just like talking off the top of my head. There's no script for this one. I'm kind of just giving you my general thoughts as to what makes, whatever the daily topic is. Yesterday, it was whether or not Baskin and Stanley should be around the Little Cup. Didn't script that one either. So let me know what you guys think of this, if you'd rather see it a little bit more scripted out and completely thought out. But I thought I'd give you guys kind of my raw thoughts on this, because this is a debate I have all the time with a ton of people. But it's going to circle back around to this main theory thing where in draft, versatility is incredibly important. Having a Pokemon that can fit many different roles, fit many different play styles, fit many different team compositions and builds, whereas if I feel in Smogon, the more important thing is having a role that you perform well that is suitable to the metagame in which you're playing in. And that's kind of what makes these Pokemon good in one metagame, bad in the other one, and we'll kind of talk about that. So first up, we have Reggia Lucky. Now, Reggia Lucky definitely isn't bad in Smogon. Now, obviously, it's not OU Titan banned Ubers like these next 2 mons that we're gonna talk about here. But it's obviously very, very solid. Now, if I'm remembering Reggia Lucky correctly, what it can do in Smogon is it can run like Spectre Thunderbolt, Volt Switch type sets, or it also can be like Reflect Light Screen with like a Light Clay. Oh, that's a Light Ball. I mean, it looks like it fits thematically with a Light Clay, and then you can go like Wild Charge and Explosion and go max out of it. It has a great speed tat, so it's a really reliable screen setter. You can also go Rapid Spin as well to get rid of hazards and be hazard control. So it's really reliable in that sense. Obviously, there isn't anything outspeeding this thing in the game, minus Scarfers, and even then, most Scarfers you will outpace, which is really cool. Decent attacking stats, and along with Transistor, you're actually pretty strong with your Electric Stab, which is really, really solid. So it fits that nice niche role much better. But the reason I think Reggia Lucky is so bad in draft is because it does these two things really, in providing screen support and being that fast, strong electric type, and that's it. Look how shallow this move pool is. I think this Pokemon will be phenomenal. If Hidden Power still existed, I feel like it would be very good in draft. If it had Toxic, I think it would be really good. I think Sub-Toxic Alecki would be great, but it's so hard for Alecki to thrive in a format where its coverage to hit ground types is Swift or Explosion that I just deleted, or Body Slam, or Assurance, if you're playing like Golurk or something like that, or Palo-Sand, or some shenanigans like that. You don't have good coverage at all. You have a very, very shallow offensive move pool, along with being very frail meteor defensively, not being very bulky at all. Obviously, AD 50-50 is not very good. The HP isn't bad, but the defenses are pretty terrible. And Electric isn't necessarily the greatest defensive typing in the world. Not awful, but not great. So that really, really holds it back from really having much use in this metagame, or being justifiably worth drafting, in my personal opinion. One of the main things that really stops me is obviously it's stopped by grounds, and 99% of grounds are gonna wall it, and that'd be different if ground wasn't a very prevalent typing. But ground is one of the things that 99.9% of the time, especially in more experienced draft leagues, you are going to see a ground type drafted. It is basically a rule of thumb that you're drafting a ground type. It's not even an unwritten rule of draft. You are drafting a ground type, so you don't get volt switched on by not just Reggia Lucky. It's not Reggia Lucky that's forcing this kind of trend like Dracovish was early in the generation, with people drafting a bunch of water absorb mons. It's just because it's a generally great thing, especially in Generation 8 with no hidden power. Electric types already took enough of a hit, but some of them at least have ways to push through grounds. Things like Heliolisk and Galvantula and things like that. Once I have, grass and water coverage and ice coverage and different things like that, thrive much more. I look at a Pokemon like Jolteon, and I see it as more worth drafting. You have that great speed stat. You're a little bit weaker with your electric stat, which is a little bit unfortunate, but overall, you're stronger. Volt Absorb and Quick Feet are a little bit more versatile abilities, obviously giving you an immunity and giving that decent speed control, but you have access to things like Wish. You have access to Light Screen and Reflect, so you have that dual screens option. Realistically, the only thing that you are missing out on is Boom and Rapid Spin, but that's fine. You have Baton Pass for Dry Momentum, which is obviously very solid, and then you have stronger neutral coverage for grounds and Shadow Ball and Hyper Voice and things like that, to where you have superior coverage to those types of mons that Reggia Lucky doesn't. All Reggia Lucky has is that Hazard Control, Boom, and Speed, and already you're gonna be faster than 99% of the things on the field with Jolteon. And what is Jolteon's Smogon tier right now? Smogon. So let's look it up right now. Sword and Shield Strategy Pokedex. It is in PU opposed to UU, because it just doesn't fit the same the megames as well. Oh, and also it has access to Heal Bell and Toxic. I'm forgetting these things that it can do. It just does what I want Reggia Lucky to do, but better, in my opinion. And I think it really falls back to that versatility type thing. And you typically, in most leagues, especially maybe not some of the Wi-Fi scene as much, because it's a little bit overvalued in the Wi-Fi scene from what I've seen. Maybe not as much in the Wi-Fi scene, but it's definitely tiered around that Jolteon price. There's so many electric types that are just better in the metagame, or better in covering overall, opposing teams and covering your team composition, stuff like that, than Reggia Lucky. Unfortunately, as cool as he looks, I think he's the coolest designed Reggie by far, and I think he's pretty solid in a standard metagame where your opponent isn't counter teaming you. You're building to fit a certain meta. And that leaves lots more holes for Reggia Lucky to do well. You're more likely to see a team without a ground type in OU or UU than you are in draft. And that's just a fact in my mind. And you're also not playing a ground type you might not be playing a ground type that's super bulky, or you might have a team that forces a lot more damage on the ground type with other things you have, because your opponent couldn't sufficiently prep for them because it's not draft league. So that's kind of the main general gist of this. We'll kind of go over these things as we go, and kind of talk about them. That's kind of gonna be the main big tangent and rant though, so you don't have to worry about the video being 9 minutes of discussion per Pokemon. That definitely won't be happening. Don't worry about it. Spectre is a thing a lot like that. In OU, you're going to see it typically get overwhelmed with a lot of builds a lot more. Not every team is going to have that dark type or that bulky normal that just shits on Spectre. Just sits on it all day. Where in draft, having a bulky normal and having a dark type are two incredibly important things. And I don't think Spectre is half as bad as a Lucky. No, it's not a Pokemon I personally enjoyed when I had it. It's not a Pokemon I'd really ever draft again. And it's a Pokemon that I also think would be crazy with Toxic or Hidden Power. I think it'd be great in draft with those two things. But it's mediocre coverage to hit those normal and dark types. Those ghost resistant immunities are so lackluster that it's really hard to justify drafting it in my mind. It's a little bit better, a little bit more versatile. You have Wisp, and you have access to things like Foul Play. I guess Hex could be kind of cool. Taunt is obviously very solid. You can Nasty Ball, you can Calm Mind. You can do a bunch of different things in that sense. And you can wear down your checks on your own a lot more sufficiently. This isn't a Pokemon that's just unusable, garbage, doo-doo butter, dog water, terrible mon. But it's definitely not as good as it is in Smogon, where it was banned in OU. And again, I don't have enough knowledge on Smogon OU to say like Spectre shouldn't have been banned or should be banned or anything like that. But obviously it's very, very good. And I think, obviously those people that know a lot more than me about a Smogon metagame, but I think it, again, falls into that category of I'm prepping for an entire metagame, or I can't prep for specifically Spectre all the time when I'm prepping for an entire metagame. And in draft, I can. There's so many bulky low tier normals. There's so many fat annoying dark types that can deal with it. And a lot of those things weren't in OU and weren't typically seen in OU. I've used things like Licky Licky to absolutely shit on Spectre and sit on them forever. A ton of different dark types that really do beat it. Things like that you're not going to see in OU. So I think it obviously just fit into the metagame phenomenally. And it's not saying that Spectre would have been stopped and fucking PU, whoever Licky Licky is, and been absolutely dogged there because he's there. But what I'm saying is there's not as much prevalence of those things in the OU tier, at least at the time when Spectre was there. And again, it's the prevalence of the type that really walls it for Spectre for me. It's, again, paramount to have a fat normal, really. Having that ghost immunity in Gen 8 where there's no pursuit in the game is really, really important. You want that ghost immunity really, really bad. You'll see some teams without a normal type, but typically you won't. And then a dark type is a required type in draft. Not just to have a ghost resist, especially this gen, but also to not be smashed by bulky psychics that are running mono psychic, stored powers type sets, double dance type sets, that can set up all over you and really do you dirty. So that's obviously Spectre. Next, we're going to talk about G-Darm. G-Darm, another mon that's very solid. I've used Spawn draft before. I think it's great in draft. I think it's really cool. Incredibly overhyped and I guess overhyped is really the best way to putting it in draft, where people look at this mon, they're like, damn, this thing's busted. First mon banned in Sword and Shield OU, things like that, blah, blah, blah. It's good in draft. It's very solid, but there's plenty of counterplay around it, and obviously hazards and scouting with moves like Protect, Faster, Scarfers, Resist Berries, things like that you're not going to see as much in an OU metagame where you have to specifically prep for it. And again, I'm kind of beating a dead horse with that fact, and we'll kind of talk about different things with these next three mons. But for these three especially, I think they really kind of like hit the nail on the head in the sense that these Pokemon were overwhelming because I couldn't build my entire team around making sure G-Darm doesn't OHKO everything and isn't faster than everything and things like that. Where I feel like I can do that a lot easier in draft. I can fit Protect on mons a lot easier. I can fit Resist Berries, things like that, while not becoming overly weak to the rest of the metagame. If that makes any sense to me, to you guys. Next up, we have Bisharp. Bisharp, it's not so much that it's bad in draft, again. It's more so that Bisharp is a steel type that isn't really a steel type. Steel types in draft are typically a lot fatter, or you want your steel to be a lot fatter, a lot bulkier, to form that like really solid defensive pivot into a lot of common typings like Dragon and Fairy and things like that. So that your team can have a little bit better of a defensive backbone, and Bisharp just doesn't add that, unfortunately. That 4x weakness to fighting is definitely very glaring and tough. It's a Pokemon that I would definitely consider drafting if I had a better like budget steel, if I had something like Steelix as well in the back. Not a very reliable rocker, and obviously a dark type that drops to any stray fighting move from that bulky psychic. And not that every dark type takes those moves well, but they don't immediately die, which is obviously unfortunate. I know my boy Jason Dietite is very happy that I brought up this mon because he hates this thing. I don't think it's that bad, but I think it's a really good indicator of a Pokemon that's a lot better in the OU metagame, where it's OU, obviously, right now, but you typically see it in high tier 3s if you're doing a tier-based draft. Which I guess would equate to like art. You can't even really equate them because they're so different. I can't even really equate them. But you can see the drop off is pretty hefty from Smogon OU to like tier 3 in draft. You know what I mean? Next is Magnus, and I think this one is pretty self-explanatory. It's really good in OU because you're going to see a lot of Corviknights, especially. You're going to see some Skarmories, and you might see some Celestials, especially last gen. In draft, you're facing 3 of those tops this season. Other than that, it really struggles to trap different steals types this generation without hidden power. It's still very solid, and I know Dr. Slacking might be very upset because he really likes Magnus, but he doesn't even like it for Magnet Pull, so maybe he agrees with me. It's a lot harder to trap steel types with this thing this generation. Obviously, you have like Iron Defense, Body Press type sets, but those take a lot more time. I can't hidden power, Specs hidden power fire things. I can't immediately Oko Ferrothorns anymore or anything like that. And that pretty big glaring weakness to ground, being very slow, and definitely not frail, but not the bulkiest thing in the world in the sense that it gets chipped very easily, especially when you take, things like spikes into consideration. It's not a very good scarfer for a Pokemon that wants to Volt Switch around and trap things and gain momentum and things like that. So it doesn't fit on a lot of teams, and it typically goes undrafted in a lot of drafts. But obviously, Magnus is an OU GOAT, absolute stablemon. Really makes a lot of those cool underappreciated mons shine well because it can trap those flying steel types that wall everything in the lower tiers indefinitely, which is obviously very, very cool. I like Magnus a lot. I definitely don't think it's an awful Pokemon, but there's no denying that in OU it's so much better than it is in a standard draft league type sense. And this one surprised me when I was doing a little bit of research for this video, looking over the Smogon tiers, kind of getting a general sense of the metagame. Slowbro Gallery is UU, and I don't know why. It must be a case of matching up well against the metagame in which it's in. Because this Pokemon is never drafted in draft, and I play 90% draft. I don't play a lot of Smogon tiers anymore. Very passively on the side. I play, a little bit of UU every once in a while. I play a lot of DPP OU, which is definitely not where Slowbro Gallery resides. I go through stints where I like OU. I play Little Cup. I play some Mario every once in a while, things like that. But mostly draft, and I don't see this thing drafted. It's not very good. Defensive typing is okay. Very middle of the road type of stats. Regenerators obviously have awesome ability. It's probably the best ability in draft, if not in competitive Pokemon. In general, at least singles competitive Pokemon. Solid coverage, things like that. But it's just something I typically don't see drafted because it's just very middle of the road. And my bulky Psychic and my grounded Poison, I usually want them to fulfill different roles. I could see myself drafting this as a bulky Psychic. I don't think I could see myself drafting this as my grounded Poison. I like having T-Spikes. I like having, different options and a little bit more speed and versatility out of my Poisons, typically when I draft them. So this one just isn't very alluring to me, and I don't really know how to explain it other than, I don't see this thing drafted ever. Maybe it's just the circle of community in the leagues I'm playing, and maybe Slowbro Gallery is a tier 3 certified GOAT in a lot of different leagues, but I just don't see it very often. So I figured I'd at least mention that one. There's a ton of other honorable mentions that I could go. One big one would be Blissey and OU. I think last gen Blissey would have definitely been on this list right here. Blissey obviously has gotten buffed a ton in draft in heavy duty boots, which is obviously really good, but it's a lot more passive in draft when you can build for it. So it's definitely not as good. Same thing with Chansey. I actually drafted Chansey the first time in a league. I have a rule where if I think a Pokemon's awful, I will draft it once, and I will try it, and I'll determine if it's really awful. I drafted Chansey recently in the league. I brought it once. It did its job in that one game, so I gotta give it props. But other than that, I can't justify bringing it ever, because it's so damn passive and it gets taken advantage of when you know Chansey is coming. It's the same reason why Stall isn't as good in draft. And let me know if you guys would like to see a video on that. Why Stall isn't as good as draft as it is in OU, because when you can specifically prepare for these more passive threats, you have more ways of exploiting them. If I pull up in OU with a team that just simply does not deal with these Stall Pokemon very well on a consistent basis, I'm not going to be able to beat them. But in a counter team format, I think it's a lot easier to deal with Stall and fatter Pokemon, things like Blissey and Chansey. Tentacruel is in UU, which is definitely a little bit higher than typically you'd usually see it. Things like Doublade and RU. Dracovish is a lot better in Smogon than it is in draft, but it's good enough in draft where I figured I wouldn't mention it here. Melmetal, another mon that's a lot better in OU than it is in draft, but it's great in draft still. I really like Melmetal in draft, so I definitely don't want to put him there, but I would see why some people would. And then Urshifu is another one, especially Rapid Strike. Rapid Strike is very good in OU right now. I see it a lot in different videos, and my when I was doing some research for this stuff, I see it's used a decent amount. It's very solid, but it's very mediocre as a tier 1 in draft. Definitely solid still. I've drafted it a few times. I like it a lot, but it's definitely not metagame Titan Urshifu single strike or something like that. So definitely think that Urshifu Rapid Strike falls into that category. Now next, 20 minutes into the video, I'm finally going to begin talking about Pokemon that are really good in draft, but not as good in Smogon. And I'm going to I want to highlight them and show why they're good in draft. And why it blows my mind that they're not as good in Smogon. But again, I'm not saying that's wrong. Like, I can't believe these Smogon guys aren't using X Pokemon that I love in Draft League. They just simply don't mold into the metagame as well as they do in Draft, where they're a lot more versatile and they can fulfill a ton of roles, where in Smogon, they're supposed to fill that one role and they might not fulfill it as well as the next Pokemon, if that makes sense. First up, I feel like the poster child for this, Necrozma is RU. Again, I don't get it. You would have seen my most recent draft analysis. We drafted Necrozma again. This is a certified tier 1, in my mind, top 10 in Galar Dex Draft League Pokemon. I think, sorry about that Badoop noise. Thanks, Instagram. But yeah, I think Necro is a certified top 10 mon in draft. It's so incredibly versatile. It does so many different things, but it's not typically going to do a lot of those things in a standard Smogon type metagame. As Autotomized a set of Calm Mind, Dragon Dance, Earth Power for steals, Heat Wave for steals, obviously Knockoff for great utility, Moonlight and Morning Sun for recovery, Meteor Beam for Power Herb type sets, which is super sick. It has Stealth Rocks and again Rock Polish, which is nice obviously. It has Swords Dance and Thunder Wave and Trick Room to be a Trick Room setter, X's to hit Dark types, as well as Brick Break up here. A ton of different options, in all honesty. I really do like this thing a lot. It gets Cosmic Power as well. You can go Cosmic Power. Where's Stored Power? Did I lose Stored Power? It's messed up. Where is it? There it is. Stored Power. You can go Weakness Policy type sets. There's so many different things that Necro can do, but it's not going to shine in a metagame where it's kind of pigeonholed into one or two roles, as much as Draft League, where I can look at a matchup and be like, Call My Necro goes crazy, but I like Fat Rocks, Rocky Helmet Necro as well to check X Fighting type, and things like that. So that's obviously a really big indicator of this. Next up, we have Suicune. I believe Suicune is either in RU or NU right now. I don't remember which one. I know it's very low. Suicune's another Pokemon that's really good in draft. It just doesn't match up well against... It isn't very good in the UU and OU metagames right now. Obviously, Suicune's seen great success in Smogon before in OU and UU throughout its, illustrious lifespan in competitive Pokemon. But right now, it doesn't match up as well versus the metagame. And in draft, it's still an absolute menace. And this is a bit of an exception to the rule. And there's another Pokemon that's a bit of an exception to the rule. In the sense that it isn't very versatile, but in a Draft League metagame where you don't have as many top tier threats that just kind of deal with Suicune very well, Calm Mind Protect and Rest Talk and Subtoxic and things like that are going to be a lot harder to deal with over the course of a game. So I think Suicune's great. It's another Mon RODL with Necro. And third in a row, another Mon RODL with Necro. Sylveon's an NU, man. That's crazy. This is a top 3 fairy type in the draft format, in my mind. Top three fat defensive fairy types. I think you have Clef, and honestly, I think Sylveon's the second best. I love Sylveon. I'm sorry if you can hear my cat meowing outside the door. I think Sylveon is absolutely phenomenal with Pixelate. It got access to Mystical Fire this gen, so it doesn't have to worry about hitting Steel types with Hidden Power anymore, which is obviously very solid. Wish and Protect and Calm Mind and Heal Bell and Baton Pass for Momentum. It gets Curse, which I've run before, which is definitely super sick. It gets Heal Bell. This thing does not die either. It's so hard to take down. This Pokemon is great. It's phenomenal in a draft setting where it blanket checks so many different high tier offensive threats. It just doesn't match up that same way in the Smogon scene right now. Obviously, I'm sure you could pull up with a lot of these Pokemon know you and have success, but generally, they're down here because their usage is low in those types of tiers. And that's, kind of telling of what I mean. Next up is an ICP member of ours in Starmie, another NU Pokemon, which is crazy. Starmie, I believe, has been UU or above in previous generations, but with Rapid Spin and Flip Turn and the crazy coverage it has, Analytic Life Orb hits throwing off crazy damage, or being Natural Cure and fat and defensive and being that status absorber, being a great spinner, and like I said, getting momentum now is so sick for it. I really do think that this thing is very solid. Power Meteor Beams sets are definitely very viable. It has a phenomenal speed tier in 115, outspeeding a ton of things, and in draft, a very important benchmark to have on your team, something to have on your team, is having something that is 110 plus speed. And Starmie hits that, and it's one of the few Pokemon that hit that. This is typically a Pokemon you'll see around the tier 2 range, but it's down in NU, which is, again, insane. Pretty nuts to me. So Starmie's another really, really good example of that in my mind. Just checking how long this video's getting. It's getting pretty long. I'll ramble a little bit. And then Kingdra. Kingdra, another kind of exception to the rule, a lot like Suicune. As if it's not the most versatile thing in the world, but Rain is so good in draft that Kingdra, by extension, is very good in draft, and I understand why it's pretty low tiered in Smogon, because it's not very viable outside of Rain and Smogon, but in draft I feel like it's a little bit more viable in the sense that I can at least bring it up. Water Dragon's a very solid defensive typing, and then Critdra is definitely something that is very solid. Focus Energy plus Sniper and Scope Lens, giving you guaranteed crits, is very hard for a lot of teams to deal with, especially fatter, more defensive teams that are going to try and pivot around Kingdra and wear it down in the Rain. I've definitely run a lot of Critdra in my day when I've drafted Rain. I think this Pokemon's obviously very, very solid. You got access to Flip Turn and Hurricane this gen. Ice Beam's another coverage option, and then its stabs just usually rip through 90% of teams. It's really hard to switch into something like Kingdra consistently, and it gets Dragon Dance as well, which gives another layer of versatility in draft. And you see things instead of just seeing like Specs or Life Orb special. I've run Choice Band Kingdra before. Very solid offensive option, and then makes your flip turns that much stronger. You chip down your own checks, then you liquidation them in the end game and do a ton of damage. And I've even seen defensive Kingdra before put in a lot of work, so it definitely has a little bit of more versatility outside of the Smogon scene in draft, but typically you do see it on Rain, and again, I get it a little bit, but NUBL is pretty nuts. Definitely pretty nuts. And last, I think this is a big teller on a Pokemon that is so much better in draft than it is in Smogon, and that's Silvally. There's not a single Silvally form that is above PU right now. Not a single one, which is absolutely nuts. Obviously, when you draft Silvally, in draft, you have the option, usually, in most leagues, I think we're past the point in which leagues will limit your Silvally types, where you can use every Silvally type. And that's really valuable in a setting where you counter team your opponent, because either you could see, wow, SD Flame Charge, multi-attack Silvally Dark absolutely demolishes my opponent. I'm bringing that this week. Where you can see, oh man, I lose to X threat. I need to bring a Silvally Grass. Or like, yeah, I lose to Zygarde and my grass is Vileplume, so it's neutral to arrows. That's not good. I'm going to bring Silvally Grass with Ice Beam and then check that thing phenomenally. So it covers so many holes, whether it be offensively or defensively. Has a nice base 95 stats all the way across the board. Phenomenal coverage, as you can see. It's a jack of all trades, master of none. But it's very good in a draft league setting where it doesn't need to be the best at one specific thing. It needs to be really good at a ton of different little things. And this is not a Pokemon that you'll see in tier 4, tier 5, where if you were to translate like Smogon tiers to draft, you wouldn't see them like that. And I think this video is very telling on why we don't see like UCL style drafts anymore, where you get like 3 OU Pokemon, 3 UU Pokemon, 3 RU Pokemon, 3 NU Pokemon, things like that, because teams would just be too good. Teams would just be way too good, and really good drafters would be able to absolutely exploit that style of drafting. I think it would be interesting to see someone do that. So if you have done a UCL style draft, let me know in the comments, and let me know Pokemon that you think are either way better in Smogon than they are in draft, or way better in draft than they are in Smogon. I would love to see Pokemon that I missed on this type of list that you think are really underrated or really overrated in their respective metagames and things like that. I think stuff like this is really interesting. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of these more free-flowing conversation type videos. Really unedited. I've been talking for 30 minutes. I feel like I'm about to pass out. I'm so tired. I don't know how people do this on a daily basis, but yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Like if you enjoyed, sub if you're new. I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.